Today, we're going to talk about how to open up and talk to others about your mental health. We talked about agency in one of our first episodes, and this is really an extension of that. Having the courage to speak about what's going on with you to someone else is one of the hardest things you can do if you've never done that before. There's really two kinds of people in the world. Those people who can have a conversation about emotions, especially difficult emotions, and there's those who can't. I grew up in a family where we didn't really have that skill set. We didn't talk openly about our emotions. We tried to figure it out ourselves, or a lot of times emotions just got built up and there would be explosions. Either there would be apologies, or maybe we just ignore it and we move on and we pretend like it never happened. We never really learned how to talk through difficult emotions. I have a lot of compassion for my parents because I realize now that they grew up in families that were very similar to that. They didn't learn that skill set. So you mentioned generational trauma, and that's the generational trauma that was passed down through my family, through the generations. Since I didn't have those skills and I never saw them modeled, I never learned them in school either because we didn't really have these programs for social and emotional learning. I skated by and did the best I could. When I was in grad school, I was having a bit of an existential crisis because I came to Stanford, thought I was going to do this computer music program, and it wasn't working out for me. And I just didn't know what I was going to do with my life. I went to the on-site therapist for student healthcare. It was very helpful. She diagnosed me with depression, which I'd never really thought of before. I was calling my mom to talk to her about it, and I said, "Mom, I've got depression." Her response to me, never going to forget it for the rest of my life, she said, "I failed you as a mother." And it was this thing where I just wanted some validation. I'm like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. That must be really hard." Some sort of compassionate response, but she didn't know how to do that. Again, I'm not faulting her, but her response was essentially to bring it back to herself and essentially ignore the struggle I was having and to bring it back to, oh, now she's struggling and now I have to step up and take care of her.
Dave, I think your story is so relevant and important to be sharing, and I just appreciate your bravery and vulnerability. This idea of knowing who to share with and when to share is really important when you're thinking like, I don't feel good, I need to talk to somebody. And the simple act of going to talk to somebody can be really hard. And then when you go to somebody in your family and that person is supposed to be there, if they don't listen, that can be a real difficult moment for folks. Sharing that is helpful because I'm sure you're not the only person who's had this experience. A lot of folks have had that experience. Right. So that's why you're sharing it, right?
It is, yeah. It's not comfortable to share these stories publicly, but I'm doing it because I feel like there is a greater purpose here. You're not alone if these things are happening to you, and you can get better if there is help. The hardest thing, I think, for running into something like this, especially with close family, is this belief that this is just the way I am, this is just the way my family is. Maybe this is the way all families are. Or maybe other families have it better, but we don't, and that's just the way it's going to be. I didn't realize that I could talk to other people like this. There's two kinds of people. There's people you can open up to, and they're responsive, and they're supportive, and they're compassionate, and there's people who don't have that skill set.
Right.
What I would want the younger me to know is there are people out there, and that you can open up to them, and that is the path forward. A therapist could be that, a friend, a teacher, a counselor, a coach. There's a term I like to use for these people, and that's compassionate witness. Mm-hmm. So it's someone who can witness you in your vulnerability and your emotional difficulty and reflect back as a sense of humanity. I feel what you're going through, but that doesn't make you any less of a human. You're still a worthy person, and I'm still here with you, and we're going to talk through this.
Yeah. Some people have a real sense of loneliness and disconnection. We give a lot of simplistic advice to people. Well, just go talk to somebody. Mm-hmm. Not everybody has somebody to talk to. People in community will say, well, I don't have anybody to talk to. There's ways of thinking about how to reach out to people, but those aren't things we're really taught in schools or taught in our families. You have teachers, you have your neighbors, people in your clergy or church. It's good to go out and have these conversations and be a little bit brave. And that's kind of a theme throughout our podcast. I think knowing that sometimes you'll go to somebody and they might not be able to listen to you will help you manage your expectations and hopefully move forward and continue finding people. Because sometimes you'll have that experience. You might feel shut down or, oh, that was really hard. Should I keep going? And what we want to say to you is keep going. Mm-hmm. You know, there are people who want to listen.
That was the takeaway I had. I can't share this with my mom, and if I can't share it with the people closest to me, like who can I share it with? Why would strangers want to hear this? These are just stories we tell ourselves. They don't reflect the reality. They're essentially rationalizations for why am I not taking more responsibility for my own well-being. It's not that you're a bad person if you're thinking these things or not reaching out. It's scary. It's scary to take that step to open up to someone, especially if you have been shut down before. If you're afraid about how they're going to react. If my family isn't going to react in a good way, why would a stranger? You could get to the point where you're thinking, I'm not even worthy. That's a really dark place to be, but I just want to throw it out there because I've had those thoughts too. If you open up to the wrong person, not taking it personally, having that perseverance to keep going, even if you run into a few difficulties along the way, and finding that right person.
As somebody who's worked as a professional in community, working with young people and their families, there's kind of a code in the work that I do that if you're working with a family or a young person and it's not the right fit, and they come to you and they say, hey, you're really nice, or we like you, but it's just not working for us. We do our best in the field to find the right person. Maybe something I was doing wasn't helping them feel acknowledged in their journey. You're having that conversation and you realize maybe they're busy, maybe they're having a bad day, or maybe it just doesn't work. They might not be able to support you. It's not you. It's the situation. It can feel like it is your fault, especially if you're from a trauma background. We want you to keep going.
You might be scared to open up because these are potentially vulnerable things. You might think they make you a bad person. You might have some shame around some of the things that might have happened to you. And I will say that the bad things that have happened to you don't make you a bad person. In fact, you're still worthy of love and belonging, and you're worthy of getting better. We don't want you to suffer for the rest of your life just because something bad happened and you don't feel you can open up and talk to someone about it. This term, compassionate witness, comes from a quote from Peter Levine, and he said, "Trauma isn't what happens to you, but it's what you hold inside for lack of a compassionate witness." And I really love this because it gets to the point of everyone is going to go through some traumatic experiences in their lives. They're going to go through something that is really difficult. And the question is, how do you move forward from that? We have a lot of people out there who probably have gone through some really traumatic things and haven't been able to open up to other people about that. Maybe it's because they don't feel safe. Maybe it's because they have been shut down. Keep trying to find that compassionate witness, open up and share your story. Because there's another quote I like: you either own your story or your story owns you. And don't let your story own you. This is back to agency. You can own your story. You can own your life. Maybe these bad things happen to you. That doesn't define who you are moving forward. You can still live a happy, healthy life. You can process your emotions. You can learn to do things differently moving forward, but you got to take that step. No one else can do it for you.
Yeah. Everything you just said, I 100% resonate with. You can continue. You can reach out to people. Keep going. A lot of my work in community was being that compassionate witness. Nearly every family I worked with had experienced some kind of family trauma, generational trauma. I could be most helpful in listening and holding a story, not making that my story or taking their story, but trying to understand it. I always felt this obligation to understand as much as they wanted to share. And then at the right time, usually after 2 or 3 interactions and we've spent some time together and built trust, starting to offer some options of what would feel right to address this. Do you want to set up some family therapy, or do you want to set up some family meetings? But taking that time to build that relationship and trust, I think that's a big part of what listeners do. That person's going to listen, and then you can tell the wheels are going to start spinning, and they're going to say, hey, I know about this resource, or I know about this therapist. That is the next step for helpers. At the right time, we're going to try to help. And if you're not ready, it's okay to say, I'm not ready. That person who's helping should honor that and listen more to understand how they can continue helping, or maybe understand the resistance.
One other reason I might not have reached out in the past is because I thought, what are they going to do to fix my problem? They can't magically come in and give me a job or fix my family. So what's talking about it going to do? It does a lot, honestly. Back to owning your own story, just saying it out loud to someone else and have them validate it, making myself feel less alone. I'm not crazy. I don't have to hold this inside anymore. I've shared it with the world. It's this truth that's out there. I feel better for having shared it. If you're holding back because you're worried that this person isn't going to be able to help me, I have found just sharing it has been helpful.
Yeah, the compassionate witness idea is very powerful because you're telling somebody outside of yourself who's going to have understanding. And then that's somebody you can go to later, continue that conversation. It's okay to practice telling your story too, by yourself, in the shower. I've practiced sharing my story many times. When I get in front of that person and I'm like, okay, here I am trying to find the words, the person will sense that I'm there to ask for something. When people are coming to me to ask for help, I'm being very intentional to give off signs that I'm listening and I'm paying attention and welcoming you. We step into that brave moment when we say to somebody, hey, listen to my story.
I love that concept of practicing. I've actually done journaling, and that's a way of sharing your story with someone, with the world, without actually sharing it with someone. And it's a good way to practice the story. Sometimes just journaling about it is a way of getting it out in the world, and you don't need to do anything more with it. It's a way to get your thoughts together and think about how you want to present your story, what feels right for you, without actually feeling awkward and uncomfortable doing it in front of someone else. I've done it online sometimes, and you just delete it. You don't need to keep it around. It doesn't need to be in the world. If you want to write it out, you can always shred it. Start practicing doing this to take ownership of your story so that then you can start reaching out and finding compassionate witnesses who can be a witness for your story.
That's an amazing idea. The journaling, I've seen it have amazing effects, and people be pretty creative with it and take it different directions. Some people will journal and get a lot of value out of that and keep it there. Some people will bring it to their therapist or share it with their partner. If you're not a big fan of writing, using your phone and dictation and then looking at it later. Having that time to distill your thoughts, put it down, and then process them is a nice way to get ready to do that in front of somebody else, right?
Right. It shouldn't end there. We're social creatures and we're designed to connect with each other. To just do it yourself, to try to do it on your own, it doesn't really work that way. At least that's my perspective and that's my experience, and that's what I've seen of others. To really get to that final step, you do have to find someone to share it with.
I tend to agree.
Thanks for watching, and if you want to support us, please share this with others. After all, our goal in the world is for everyone in the world to live a happy and healthy life, and that starts with you. We'll see you next time.